Okay, we're up to Daf Kufyud Aleph Amid Aleph for 2 lines into the page. Tana Rabbanan. Hamenasich shloisha lugin yayin b'chutz. If you pour 3 lug of wine outside of the Beis Hamikdash Yechayev, because that's the shear of Nisach HaYayin. Rav Elazar bar Shimon Aimer v'husha kachim b'kli. Rav Elazar bar Shimon says, but they have to be placed in a kli. So what exactly is this machlekes? So my binayi, what is the machlekes about? So the Gemara gives 2 explanations. The first explanation is Amar Rabbi Rabbi Yitzchak, Beirutze midas ikebinayu. The machlekes is when you put both these Tanoim believe that Yayin, in order to do Nisach HaYayin, in order to be Chayev outside of the Beis Hamikdash, it has to be Mekudish in a Kli Sharis. The machlekes is, if you have a Kli Sharis that, let's say, holds 5 ounces, but you had a little bit of an overflow on the top, the little bit that's above the walls, is that a little bit Kaddish as well? The first opinion holds that no. The first opinion holds that it's Kaddish as well, and therefore, if that little bit makes the 3 lug, then you're Chayev. But the second opinion of Rabbi Elazar says Husha Kaddish B'Kli, it has to be in the Kli itself, not the overflow on top. The overflow on top is not considered Kaddish, and therefore, if that overflow is necessary to be the 3 lug, you would not be Chayev. Rabbi bar the Rabbi Amar, a second explanation, and he says, Kirvei Nechsachim Bimbama Ikebinayu. So let me just sort of say this outside. This we had yesterday, and that is the ultimate machlokes between these Tanoim is whether the Nisach HaYayin has to be placed in a Kli Sharis. And what is this machlokes based on? The machlokes is based on, it's a whole lengthy thing, but it's really one yesod, and that is, was there Nisach HaYayin in the Midbar? We had this yesterday. The pasuk says that when you enter Eretz Yisrael, you should now do Nisach HaYayin. The simple explanation of the pasuk is they did not have Nisach HaYayin during the Midbar, and they only had it when they entered Eretz Yisrael. But when they entered Eretz Yisrael, you had to do it with a Kli. Other opinions hold no. Throughout the Midbar, they had Nisach HaYayin. So what does it mean that when they entered Eretz Yisrael, you can now have Nisach HaYayin again? What do you mean? They already had it. The answer is, when they entered Eretz Yisrael, they were able to have Nisach HaYayin on a private altar. During the Midbar, they only had it in the Mishkan. When they entered Eretz Yisrael, they could have a private altar. Private altars did not have Kli Sharises. And therefore, in other words, if you hold that there was Yayin throughout the Midbar, that's another way of saying that you do not need to put the Yayin in a Kli Sharis. So this machlokes Tanoim is whether there was Yayin in the Midbar, i.e. whether the Yayin has to be placed in a Kli Sharis. So if it needs to be placed in a Kli Sharis and it's not, you will not be Chayev, because it's not considered Yotza. It's not Yotza anyway. But if you hold that it does not need to be in a Kli Sharis, and you pour wine, even not from a Kli Sharis, you'll be Chayev. The Gemara says, Kirvu Nesachim Bebama Ekebinayu, the Tanya, Pukta and the night, it's really machlokes Tanoim, the Tanya, Bamas Yachid, a private altar, Eina Tzricha Nesachim. There is no libations on a private altar. There was no libations during the Midbar years. There's no libations on a private altar, only on a public altar, and it needs a Kli Sharis. The Chacham Maimrim to Nesachim will say, no, there is libations on a private altar, and it does not need a Kli Sharis. Vani Tanai, and it's really totally enough. Following machlokes of the Tanya. Ki Savoy, the pasuk says, when you come to the land of Eretz Yisrael, you'll do Nesachim. Latina Nesachim, Bebama Gedayla Kasam Medaber. The Tanakama Shita, which is Rav Yishmael, that during the years of the Midbar, they did not have Nisach HaYayin. And Dafka, when they entered Eretz Yisrael, they would do it, but it was on a public altar, on the Mishkan, and it had to be with Kli Sharis. Maybe the pasuk is saying you could have a nesachim and a private altar without Kli Sharis. The pasuk says Dafka when you enter Eretz Yisrael Moshe Seichem. Moshe is plural, meaning only on the altar that is used by everyone, which is the public altar. Did Rav Yishmael. Rav Akiva disagrees. He says no. You're able to bring the nesachim on a private altar because they had it during the Midbar, and therefore it does not need a Kli Sharis. He says, Ki Savayu, Latina Nesachim Bebama Katana Kasam Medaber. You can bring it on a private altar. Atam Lebama Katana and Lebama Gedayla. Perhaps only on a public altar. Kishoim El Eretz Moshe Seichem, the same words, but instead of Moshe Seichem using it as a communal altar, he looks at it Bebama Haneheges B'chol Moshe. Moshe Seichem means in any part of Eretz Yisrael. What's the type of altar that's in every part of Eretz Yisrael? A private altar. So you see that there was Nesachim on private altars. Kitchetim Tzaloimer, the Gemara concludes, this machlokes is very much related of whether they had nesachim in the midbar. Okay, Reb Nechemia said that shiyari adam shekrivim b'chutz chayiv, that the remnant of the blood of the chatas, if you pour it right after you bring a chatas, you have the shiurim which are poured on the base. If you were to pour that outside of the base, something that should be chayiv. So Amar Rav Yochanan, Tana Rav Nechemia Kediver Omer Shirayim Ma'akvin. Rav Nechemia holds that the Shirayim are Ma'akiv. So because they're Ma'akiv, therefore they're essential. And if they're essential, if you pour them outside of the Beis Hamikdash, you're not going to be Yotza. You're going to be Chayiv, I'm sorry. Meisvei have a kasha. Wait a minute. So you telling me according to Rav Nechemia the Shirayim are Ma'akivin? Here's the problem. The problem is that when Rav Nechemia said his Shita, the Rabbi Akiva responded to him, basically, the Shirayim are not Ma'akiv. And Rav Nechemia, instead of responding, they are Ma'akiv, he said, you're right, they're not Ma'akiv, but so what? You could still be Chayiv. So from his back and forth, it seems that Rav Nechemia does not believe they're Ma'akiv, because if he did, he would say that. The Gemara says, Meisa, V'kash Rav Nechemia says, Shiyori Hadam, Shekrivim B'chutz Chayiv. If you bring the remnants of the carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash, Chayiv. That was Rav Nechemia. Rabbi Akiva said to him, Halor Sher Adam Shir Mitzvah, but they're not Ma'akiv. Now, instead of him responding, they are, what does he say? Amar Loi, Evarim Padar Michichu, Shen Shir Mitzvah, Ve'akrivan B'chutz Chayiv. He says, well, every carbon, all the limbs, you don't have to burn the limbs on the Mizbeach, right? You're Yotze with the blood. So it's not Ma'akiv either, and yet you're Chayiv for bringing it outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So you see that even if it's not Ma'akiv, it can still be Chayiv. Amar Rabbi Akiva responded, Loi Amar Evarim Padar Shen Tchilos Avoida, Time Shir Adam Shen Ein Tchilos Avoida. Rabbi Akiva responds, you can't compare the two. Evarim Pedarim is not the beginning of the beginning of the act. It's the first act. While it's not Ma'akiv, it's at least the beginning. This, the Shirayim, is not Ma'akiv and it's the end. So it's like double not Ma'akiv. And therefore, I don't think you're Chayiv. Now the question is, Ve'emisa, but if Rav Nechemia Taka holds that it's Ma'akiv, Le'malei, Hani not Ma'akiv. Right? Rav Nechemia said his sheet, and the Rav Akiva said they're not Ma'akiv. If Rav Nechemia holds they are Ma'akiv, he should say that. So the Gemara says, Tiyufta, it's Taka, Tiyufta. The Gemara says the truth is there was a different version, and that is that Rav Nechemia, when he said his shita, that pouring the shirayim outside of Beis Hamikdash is chayiv because it's ma'akiv, he was not referring to the standard chatas. It could be the standard chatas, it's not ma'akiv. What was he referring to? He was referring to the chatas hapnimius. So according to this, it's actually not a machlekes at all. Rav Nechemia holds that it's ma'akiv, and Rav Akiva holds not ma'akiv. They both agree with each other. Rav Akiva is talking about the outside chatas, and Rav Nechemia is talking about the inner chatas. Says the Gemara, Hashadam Ravad Barav Machlekes B'Sharayim Pnimim. Al B'Sharayim Machitzim Dirakol Ma'akvi. Ki Kamar Necham B'Sharayim Pnimim. Ki Tani Hi B'Sharayim Chitzonim. Okay, so it works out. So our Mishnah that says it's Ma'akiv, it's talking about the Chatas HaPnimius, and where Nechemia implies that it's not Ma'akiv, he was talking about the Chatas HaChitzonius. So says the Gemara, wait a minute, Ihachi, I have a problem then. Then name Alei, then let Rav Nechemia respond to Rav Akiva. Ki Amar Ano Pnimim. Meaning. So now what are you saying? Rav Nechemia said that they're ma'akiv. Now he was referring to the chatas hapnimius. To that Rav Akiva said, what about the limbs? And Rav Akiva was referring to the outside. So why doesn't Rav Nechemia just say, I was talking about the inner chatas and you're talking about the outer chatas? It's still back to the same problem, which is, if Rav Nechemia holds the inner chatas is ma'akiv, he should say that. And if now the conversation is very disjointed. Rav Nechemia was talking about the inner chatas. Rav Akiva was talking about the outer chatas. So they're not talking to each other. So Rav Nechemia should just say, we're not talking about the same thing. The answer is El Dvar de Rav Akiva Ka'amar. Meaning, Rav Nechemia Taka holds that it's ma'akiv by both, the inside and the outside. So why didn't he, we had that problem before, which is, why didn't he say that? The answer is, he's trying to argue against Rav Akiva using Rav Akiva's logic. Meaning, he could have just said to Rav Akiva, again, Rav Akiva says they're not ma'akiv. He could have just said, I hold they are. His point is that even if it's like lidi dach, even if you hold, I mean lidi di, it's like the Gemara does all the time. Lidi di, it's not a shayla because he holds his ma'akiv. He's saying lidi dach, even according to you, that it's not ma'akiv, it should still be chayiv. So he could have just said his shita, but he didn't want to get into the nitty gritty. He wanted to argue, even according to you, that it's not ma'akiv, it should still be chayiv karis. Okay. New Mishnah. The Mishnah says like this: Hamoilik es ha'oif b'fnim. It's very important to know. They would do the malik on the carbon inside, and they would not do the shechita inside. So the question is, what am I chayiv for bringing a bird carbon outside of Beis Hamikdash? So hamoilik es ha'oif b'fnim. If I do malik on a carbon inside, so it's now kosher, v'hela b'chutz, and I burn it outside, then it's chayiv because I burnt an eligible carbon. Molak b'chutz, but if I did malika outside, which is not a thing, v'hela b'chutz, and then I burnt it outside, potter. I'm potter because the malika outside, it's not a kosher carbon. So what I burnt was not a carbon. Hashoichet is ha'oif b'fnim. If I shech the bird inside, which is not a thing, v'hela b'chutz, and then I burn it outside, potter. I'm potter. Go to the next page. Why? Because I did not. After you do shechita, it's not a kosher carbon. But now the Mishnah says a very big chiddush, which is shachat b'chutz. If you perform shechita on a bird outside, which normally is not a thing, but because shechita is considered a chashav act, v'hela b'chutz, and then you burn said bird, chayiv, you're chayiv. You're chayiv for the shechita and you're chayiv for the burning. So it's very interesting. the malika, if you do malika outside, you're going to be potter, even though malika is a thing. But if you do shchita outside, and if you do shchita inside, you're potter, even though shchita is a thing. But if you do shchita outside, you're chayiv. So says the Mishnah, Nimtza derech hechsher b'fnim patur mechutz, derech hechsher b'chutz patur mifnim. So you see that the malika, which is normally the proper derech, is potter from outside, but the shchita, which is not the derech, is chayiv for outside. Okay. Comes Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon says this cryptic line, which the Gemara is going to attempt to try to figure out what Rav Shimon is talking about. Rav Shimon says like this: Kol shechayav n'lav b'chutz. Anything that you're chayav on the outside, chayavin al kiyotze b'bifnim shala b'chutz. Then you chayav on the inside, which was brought outside. Chutz min hasheicha b'fnim u'mayil b'chutz, except for shchita b'fnim u'mayil b'chutz, which is not chayiv. In kol shechayav al b'chutz, chayiv kiyotze b'bifnim shala b'chutz, chutz min hasheicha b'fnim u'mayil b'chutz. Meaning, if you shecht inside and burn it outside, it's nothing, but everything else you're chayiv. So Rav Shimon is saying this cryptic line. He's clearly disagreeing about one case. We don't really know what exactly is Rav Shimon talking about. There's a case that Rav Shimon disagrees with the Tanna Kama, and the question is, what is that case? The Gemara is going to deal with this. Okay, before we get there, the Mishnah had said hechsheroi, that shchita is machsher. It should say chiyuvoi. It's not. The Gemara wants to say that you're chayiv for shchita. It shouldn't say hechsher. It says dere hechsheroi mibachutz. Hechsheroi implies that it's kosher. If you shecht outside, it's not hechsher. The Gemara says tani chiyuva. Okay, change it to chiyuva. Fine. Now here's the issue, and this is what we're going to take us to the Mishnah. What was Rav Shimon disagreeing with? What we're basically going to have is there's one pretty obvious response, but the lashon's not good. So the Gemara says Rav Shimon Omer ahechakoi. What is Rav Shimon disagreeing with? Ilem areshakoi. Now the most obvious answer is this. The Mishnah had said, if you do malika inside, the burn outside, you're chayiv. But malik b'chutz, hela b'chutz potter. If you do malika outside, you're potter. Right? If you do malika outside, which malika is normally what's done, but if you do malika outside, you're potter. To that, Rav Shimon says you're chayiv. That is the most obvious response of what Rav Shimon is bothered by. The problem with that is, and this is, it makes sense, the lashon is not meduyik. Because if he's trying to say that if you do malika outside, you should be chayiv, then it should say kol shechayiv n'lav b'chutz, kol shechayiv b'fnim iboyle. Then he, instead of saying what you're chayiv b'chutz, you're chayiv b'fnim, it should be what you're chayiv b'fnim, you're chayiv b'chutz. Meaning, he's trying to say that you're chayiv for malika. Then he should say because malika is a thing inside, it should be outside. Say b'fnim first. We don't want to change the lashon. Eventually, the Gemara is actually going to say that there was a different girsa that Rav Shimon actually said this, and the girsa has changed. But the Gemara doesn't like this, so we throw that out. The problem is then, it doesn't make sense. Basically, we're going to go through a couple of options, nothing works. So the Gemara is going to have to say there are words missing in the Mishnah that we just don't have, and that'll explain what Rav Shimon's bothered by. So the Gemara says, Ella, maybe Rav Shimon is, Pashup Shah, Rav Shimon is coming to be mechayiv, something that Tanna Kama pattered. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe Rav Shimon is pattering something Tanna Kama is mechayiv. The problem is the lashon doesn't work. Ella kiyechi de b'chutz loy mechayiv b'fnim mamle mechayiv, hay kol she'ein chayiv m'chutz m'boyle. Perhaps what Rav Shimon is trying to say is that if you do malika inside and bring it outside, you're potter. The problem is, he says chayiv. It should say loy mechayiv. The lashon doesn't work. Okay, attempt number 3, which is hashoicharev b'fnim v'hela b'chutz potter, shacha b'chutz v'hela b'chutz chayiv. The Tanna Kama says if you shecht it outside and burn it outside, you're chayiv. Maybe Rav Shimon holds potter. The problem is the same thing. The lashon should say potter. Same problem. So says the Gemara, Ella, the Gemara says, Ella, rather must be, meaning, and don't tell me it's the case where that and don't tell me that he's agreeing with the Tanna Kama, because he seems to be arguing. So what's going on over here? So the Gemara says, answer number 1 is Zeiri, which is that there was a whole case missing, and that was Shchitas Behema. It's not in our Mishnah, but you have to add it in. Shchitas Behema B'lai Leikaminayu, the case of shechting an animal at night and then burning it outside. The Tanna Kama believes that if you shecht the carbon at night inside the Beis Hamikdash and then burn it outside, you're potter. Why? Because shechita at night is not kosher. But if you shecht it at night outside and then burn it outside, you're chayiv. Because because shchit is a proper thing, and even though it's at night. So if you shecht it inside at night, no good. Outside at night, you're chayiv. To that, Rav Shimon says, Kol shalem b'chutz, chayiv b'fnim hel b'chutz, chutz min ha'sheichel b'fnim hel b'chutz. To that, Rav Shimon says, you're chayiv for shchitas inside as well. So the machlokes is, if you shecht it at night inside, and then burn it outside, are you chayiv? That's the machlokes of Shimon. And the whole case was not in our Mishnah, but you have to add it in. That's answer number one. Rabbi says a similar explanation, and that is kabla b'kli chol ikibinayu. The cases where you shechted a carbon, and you catch it in a kli chol, and then you do the zrika outside. Tanakama holds your potter, Shimon holds chayiv. V'halchi kamer. V'chein makabel kli chol b'fnim hel b'chutz potter, and makabel chol b'chutz hel b'chutz chayiv. If you shecht it inside and makabel in a kli chol, and then do the zrika outside, your potter. But if you shecht it outside and makabel in a kli chol, then you're chayiv. To that, Rav Shimon says you're chayiv in both cases. Rav Shimon calls chayiv b'chutz, chayiv k'yetz hel b'chutz. Good. That's the second explanation. The third explanation is actually what we had before, which is that really Rav Shimon is coming to say that if you do malika outside and burn it outside, you're chayiv. The problem was the lashon wasn't good because it would have to say b'fnim then b'chutz. The truth is there's a girsa that has there's a different version of Rav Shimon that actually said that outright. Hashat detani avud shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak hamoylek oif b'fnim v'hela b'chutz chayiv. Malik b'chutz hel b'chutz potter. Rav Shimon mechayiv. Rav Shimon hosam kai. Kol shechayv b'fnim hel b'chutz chayiv b'chutz. So according to this version, Rav Shimon said it outright that he was talking about Malik b'fnim hel b'chutz, and he says yechayiv, and it's not a shayla m'girsas because this girsa is taka different. Okay, what we'll do is let's do the Mishnah. Maybe I'll review it tomorrow. Let's do the Mishnah. The Mishnah says chatas shekibel dama b'kois echad. If a chatas, all the blood is received in one cup. So what you do is you apply it, and the rest is shiroyim. Nosan b'chutz. If he goes outside with the blood placed on an outside altar, so that's chayiv because he took chatas blood. B'chazav nosan b'fnim, that be chayiv. Or b'fnim b'chaz b'chutz. Or if you go inside, you apply the blood. So now the rest of the cup is shiroyim, and then you go outside and you pour it. You're chayiv because this Mishnah follows Rosh Nechemia Shita, which is shirayim, is chayiv outside of Beis Hamikdash. Shkul ra'y b'fnim. But what if, instead of catching the blood in one cup, you caught it in two cups? Now the halacha is that if you catch the chatas in two cups, if you use each cup, then it's the same halacha. But if, let's say, I only use one cup to put on all four, the second cup is not shiroim, it's called dichoy, it's rejected, it's not roy at all. So if I were to take the two cups, and cup one I were to use inside the Beis Hamikdash, rendering cup two puzzle, and then I would take cup two and pour it outside on a mizbeach outside of the Beis Hamikdash, I'd be potter, because cup two is rendered unfit. Says the Mishnah, kibel davar shtei kaisis, nasen shneim b'fnim potter, shneim b'chutz chayiv. If I take both cups and I place them inside the Beis Hamikdash, that's a kosher carbon. If I place them both outside the Beis Hamikdash, I'm going to be chayiv. Echa b'fnim, ve'echa b'chutz potter. But if I use cup A inside the Beis Hamikdash, rendering cup B unfit, and then I take cup B and use it outside the Beis Hamikdash, I'm potter. Echa b'chutz, ve'echa b'fnim. But let's say I do the reverse. I take two cups, I go outside, I use cup A outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Then I use cup B inside the Beis Hamikdash. Chayiv al chitzin v'apnim mechaper. So I'm chayiv for doing the avodah outside of the Beis Hamikdash, and the second cup is actually, it works for the inner mizbeach. For the chatas, I'm actually yotz in my obligation. Zak the Mishnah, l'mad avadami. You know what's comparable to this? Instead of two cups with one chatos, let's do two chatos. What's the case? Hamafish chatos v'avda. You mafish chatos A and you lose it. V'hivish acheres tachteha. And you replace it with chatas B. And then you find the original. So now you have A and B in front of you. If you use both of them for the inner carbon, for the carbon in the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to be, that's proper. What I mean, you're not going to be, it's potter, it's the Beis Hamikdash. Shtein b'chutz. Let's say I shech them both and I use them both outside of Beis Hamikdash, I'm going to be chayiv. But achas b'fnim. But let's say I use one inside the Beis Hamikdash. When I use one inside the Beis Hamikdash, it renders the second animal dichoy, rejected. So then, if I use the second one outside, potter. But achas b'chutz. But if I originally go outside and use one outside, I'm already chayiv for that one. And if I use the second one, chayiv al-chitzon v'apnimis v'chaperes. The second one actually works. And the Gemara just says one halacha regarding these two chatos. Keshem shedama poteres es besada, kach hipoteres es besar chaverta. The halacha is that when you do the zrikas hadama v'chatos, it makes the meat no longer me'ila. So in the case where you have two karbanos, two chatos, the second you do zrika for one, while it renders the second one unfit, because of dichoy, it also removes the me'ila of the second one. I will stop it.